So neurofeedback is a way of training dysfunctional brain waves to reduce symptoms. And that's a pretty broad statement, but it's broad because it can apply to so many different areas. Mental health is the main avenue where it's used. So it's what shows up in the brain that can be trained. Anxiety is just huge now. It's so much more prevalent, I think, than ever before. It is a beautiful method to help bring that down and let someone be able to take that pause in their head to then utilize skills we want to teach to get through that trigger. But if we don't get the pause, they're stuck. There is one piece that's important if you work with athletes in neurofeedback is that anxiety is also a drive of sorts, right? So there are some brainwave on a kiddo that's into scouting or camping that might be causing them trouble, but someone who's, gunning for the Olympics or is trying to make that high school team on a state championship school, that drive is something that's good for them. We have to be careful not to dull them while still allowing the brain to be on during their performance. Yeah. So there's a balance there, right? You don't want to just calm everything.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Perform Happy podcast. Literally, Lisa and I have just been gabbing because I cannot wait to get into this conversation. I was so excited when Lisa Kramer reached out to me to chat on the podcast about something called neurofeedback because I'm actually totally obsessed with it. And I haven't, till this very moment, shared this with anyone in my audience because I was like, it's just too hard to explain without going into this big in-depth thing. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to try it on myself. And it worked. And then I'm trying it on my kids and it's working. And so I have a professional here who can do a better job explaining this than me. Welcome to the show, Lisa. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. I love it. Yeah, I'm so excited that you tried it yourself. It's a fantastic modality.
Yes. Okay. So can you just give, a little overview of what is neurofeedback?
Absolutely. So neurofeedback is a way of training dysfunctional brain waves to reduce symptoms. And that's a pretty broad statement, but it's broad because it can apply to so many different areas. Mental health is the main avenue where it's used, I would say main arena, but sports training, concussion. Now we're seeing a lot of research and work in cognitive decline, like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, learning disabilities, all sorts of areas, chronic pain. It's what shows up in the brain that can be trained. That's the basics.
Yeah. And the way it was explained to me by my therapist was, and that it's also applicable to trauma, which is so fantastic because I know a lot of people out there do so many years of therapy. They do the EMDR, they do the talk therapy, they do all the things. And then still there are these kind of knee-jerk physical reactions, and I'm speaking for myself too, or the anxiety that was installed in me by my gymnastics coaches, that still, it's lives in my cells. And so what I've noticed is that those knee-jerk reactions have reduced. I have ADHD and I can focus. I mean, it's been really phenomenal what has happened. So can you talk about the actual process of, if someone comes to you and says, I am struggling with anxiety or we have symptoms of ADHD, what is the process that someone would go through if they were going to try this?
Yeah. So this is my process, and there's lots of practitioners all over the world. People are using this, and it's not new. This is a safe, proven method to help with all kinds of things. That's really been around since the 50s. They started research well before that. So my process is to have a person in for an assessment first. It's the EEG is your electroencephalogram. That's your brain rhythms, right? Your activity in your brain. Like an EKG is your heart rhythm. So we record your EEG. So we record that with this really silly looking cap on your head that has, a whole bunch of holes in it. And we squirt electroconductive gel into those holes. And then that cap is wired to an amplifier. And that amplifier makes your teeny tiny brainwaves loud enough for the software to record them. So we start there with everyone. We do 10 minutes eyes open, 10 minutes eyes closed, sometimes a little longer depending on what's going on. And then we analyze that data to find out what's going on in your head, what's going on in your brain, because everybody is so unique. And two people could come in with the exact same complaints and their brains will look very different, or brains look alike and their complaints are different. So it's very individualized process. So we start there and create a report of our findings, and that's called a quantitative electroencephalogram. That's a brain map. You might come across that term, brain map, or get brain mapping done. The brain map is your report. It's what was found. So we take that and sit back down and say, this is what I found. This are more questions. It always leads to more questions. Putting the heads together of your goals, right? So, and then that helps us plan, how do we do neurofeedback? So the neurofeedback is the brain training where the typical client comes in, they sit down in a comfy chair, they have 2 to 4 or 5 sensors on their head, and they're watching a screen or listening to something, or both. If their brain is going in the direction we want, the screen will stay bright and clear, the sound will be crisp, and the video will flow smoothly. If the brain is going away from that and towards the patterns that have been causing trouble for you, the screen looks like a shadow goes over it, or it gets dark, or the video stutters, or the sound gets quiet. There's lots of settings you can do to choose from. And the brain will figure it out without you having to consciously try how to get that bright screen back. It wants to stay engaged in whatever it was doing. So if it's a show or a movie or a game, or some people like audiobooks that they're listening to, and you cut off that what it's engaged in, it wants that back. It's a pleasure-seeking organ, right? So it will figure it out by trying a whole bunch of rapid changes in brainwave power and speeds and all kinds of things until it gets the bright screen. And that bright screen, or the crisp sound, is the positive reinforcement that keeps getting offered until the brain learns to bring that level back more consistently. So usually 6, 7, 8, 9 sessions in, people are starting to notice subtle changes in their regular life. Maybe, they wake up without the pit in their stomach, or that test, they didn't blank out, or sleep was better, or, all kinds of things.
I notice I just start picking things up in my house. It's just easy for me to create order. It was like just these little things. I'm like, oh, I'll just put that away now. Oh, I'll just put that away now, which has never been, my ADHD mode. It's like I have to be in cleaning mode or I'm not, but it just allowed me to be a little more organized in my thinking.
Yeah, that's great. And, we talk about your internal state is reflected in your surroundings, right? In our homes, in our offices for adults, or, a desk for a student. So when our internal state is more ordered, so you just put the prime example of that, right?
Yeah.
So
I went and purged all my kids' stuff. I mean, it was kind of like phenomenal. I was like, we're getting this place organized. Yeah. But everyone feels better when a place is organized. But so now there's different types too. I mean, I know there are more than we could even cover, but the couple that I've been introduced to are the type what you're describing, where it's sort of like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is you can take like an elite athlete brain and go, okay, we want to make my brain into an elite athlete brain so that I can then go be like an elite athlete. And so you kind of create your settings so that we go, that's the benchmark, or this is the calm brain, or this is the focused brain. Does that sort of describe how that might work as far as setting?
Yeah, I mean, that description applies to almost any method. So there's lots of types of neurofeedback. What I described is what we would call traditional, right? Amplitude training is kind of the start. My offices have a bunch of different choices on top of that. So, we talked about there's things called infra-slow fluctuation or infra-low fluctuation that work with the glia and the very, very slow brain waves that are there when we're born and very early in our development. So they can hold things for many, many years past our developing years. And so that can be a great method to handle those kinds of things.
Yeah,
There's
that's
also
what I've been using. And that's what's, a lot of people are benefiting with depression, anxiety, ADHD, trauma. And it's so interesting. It's like, but the cool thing about that I just want to like mention is that you're not setting a benchmark. What you're doing is just kind of saying, hey, brain, like this is you listening to yourself. And then your brain goes, oh, that's me. And in the way that mirror neurons work on babies, where you go, oh, you're sad. And they go, yes, I am. I feel better now. It's like it gets to listen to itself and go, hey, that's me. Oh, what if I try this? And it actually teaches your brain to know how to regulate itself at kind of this base level. At least that's how it was explained to me. Is that, do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good description. I think the idea is that it shows your brain what could be efficient and more functional. And if that rolls out in your regular life, you feel better. So it's a perpetuating cycle. So one of the biggest questions is, well, how, do I have to come back and do this every year, or how long does it last? And if we get to the place that it's consistent and robust change, we probably won't see you again, because your body and brain will hold that pattern. And barring an extreme thing like a concussion or extreme anesthesia can seem like it can unearth old patterns sometimes. But, usually it holds, and we don't see you, we see your neighbor, your kid, your boss, whoever you've told about it. But yeah, so there's lots of types. Some are stimulation, so it's not non-invasive like the ones we've talked about, but where they're actually feeding a tiny bit of current into you. And that isn't for everybody, but it can help if you haven't made progress in the traditional route. We might add that, and it gives you the bump that's needed to get the brain in that learning mode. And so sometimes those things get added. Red light therapy, photobiomodulation is an incredible area of research right now. And that's been really amazing to add to our arsenal. So yeah, it's such a broad application because we're really only working on what that person's brain looks like. Like a diagnosis per se doesn't matter as much as what do I see in your brain. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh. I have so many ways to go, but I'd love to go back to how did you first get introduced to neurofeedback, and why did you decide to integrate it in your clinical practice?
Yeah. Well, so I had been a therapist for many years and had that handful of clients that most therapists or even coaches, teachers know, that where you've tried everything in your bucket and they're still struggling and they're trying and they're frustrated, and you pull in their frustration to yourself. They've tried 4 meds. They've tried, I'm their 3rd therapist. And I had a few of them, and I just kept thinking there's got to be more. There's got to be something else I can do to help, some other method. And so I started doing a trauma certification and went to this is way before COVID. So there's, 250 people in the room at 8 a.m. and an older gentleman was teaching it, and he started out hollering at us. And he just basically said, you guys are all doing therapy like it's 1970, and you've got to cut it out. You have to take a look at what innovation has happened. And he shocked us into paying attention for sure. But neurofeedback was part of what he talked about. And that day I went and bought 2 books, I think, and started searching online. To me, it's a perfect marriage between that art and personable interaction of therapy and science, data-driven method. And I liked that science-backed approach where I could say, okay, these brainwaves are showing this, and that's not in the usual realm of functioning, so we need to change those, and then watch the symptoms just melt away. And that was wild. So that's how I started. And I started studying all these different kinds and what should I start with, and trying to talk with people in the field. And I found that the field is so wonderful. Like everybody's collaborative. Everyone I've run into anyway, I have yet to meet somebody who's doesn't want to help someone else. And there's some amazing folks that are mentors, top of the top mentors that are guiding us all, and they're treasures to us all. And then there are board certifications you can work towards and through. So there's one for neurofeedback, and I worked on that first. And then there's one for EEG, and I worked on that next. And I don't know what I'll be into next, but yeah, it's been amazing. So, and once I added it to clients who needed that extra thing besides talk therapy, I couldn't believe the changes. Really remarkable growth and regulation and bravery that came out that was missing. So yeah, I'll never go back. I've done a deep dive. So.
Yes. I'm like 6 months into my little toe dip into it, but I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many implications. So a lot of the athletes that I work with and that my team works with are particularly struggling with anxiety and fear. And there's this one thing that happens where they will be sort of flooded with anxiety around a certain skill. And there's like, the brain is detecting a threat and sending the freeze response. It's irrational. It becomes almost like the level of a phobia where they can do it, but their body isn't allowing it to happen. I'm curious, how you might apply neurofeedback with someone like that. That's like what I'm just buzzing about, is the idea of getting a gymnast in to do this and then, see what the impact is on a mental block.
Right. Yeah, there for sure is, I would say 90% of the time, some very clear markers in their EEG that is existing, and that fight or flight freeze response is stuck on. It may need the trigger to like make it really flare, but it's usually there in a, low buzz way through all of their day and all of their sleep, which gets ruined. So, and one of my wheelhouses is in concussion. I love to work with concussion and post-concussion syndrome because they've tried everything usually before they come. And there is that piece of anxiety. This sounds bad, but like almost like it gets rattled into their brain, right? Whatever that concussion and the sequelae, the fallout after that happens with concussion. And I imagine a lot of that is the same with gymnasts, with ice skaters, with people who fall a lot when they're doing their prep and their practice. Never mind, we know about impact sports, but these aren't impact sports, but they're still getting those jarring hits that, go up. So yeah, I mean, and the anxiety is just huge now. It's so much more prevalent, I think, than ever before. And it is a beautiful method to help bring that down and let someone be able to take that pause in their head to then utilize skills we want to teach to get through that trigger. But if we don't get the pause, they're stuck.
Yes, if you're in that reactive state. And that's something I've noticed in myself, is that ability to pause. It was, instead of my husband has road rage and then I rage at him about the road rage, he has road rage.
I resonate with that. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Just these like little things that I'm like, I used to just react in a way that it just felt unconscious, that I couldn't stop it. I'm like, I don't want to be mad about his road rage. It's been 15 years. This is not going anywhere. I might as well, like, Rebecca, when are you going to accept this? But it was like at the brain level. It's so interesting to think, like, keeping a room clean is at the brain level. Reacting to someone's yelling is at the brain level. So there are, we can meditate. There are a lot of skills that someone can use to cope, but it feels like this is a tool that can really accelerate some of those other tools.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think of, when you work with all your sports folks, the yips, right? We call them in golf, but that idea that I freeze or I blank in the midst of when I need to be in the flow of my athletic, whatever endeavor that is. And that's really fun to work with because they kind of slowly melt away and all of a sudden they're doing it. And it's like, I always talk about pain. We notice pain when it's there, but when it starts to dissipate or it's not as frequent, you don't notice it until you actively review. Wait a minute. Oh, I guess I didn't have a headache. But it's the same thing with the yips. In the beginning, they're like, I didn't shank the ball or whatever they're doing, because of that pattern that had been there. And then they are aware of the change. It's awesome. Fun.
Yeah. Okay. So then there's the application piece. And now I know my system that I invested in, that I have clinical oversight. So my practitioner is observing me and making sure I don't just go all willy-nilly with my training. Like, we have clinical protocols and, everything's set. But it's this like system from 1985 that's, the craziest, most complicated. Like if you don't know how to run a Windows PC from 1985, you're like, ugh. But so my big thing is, how do we get access to families to do this? So if a family is listening going, oh my gosh, like they're already Googling before the episode's over, what is your recommendation on how to like seek care for this? And then there's consumer grade versus clinical. I know like those are two maybe different topics, different questions, but how do they proceed in figuring out how to support their athlete if this feels like something
right? Well, let's start with my recommendation first. You do want to get that EEG done. I believe there are systems and there are practitioners that don't work with that guidance. I approach it in that I am not going to guess with your brain, and nor should anyone else. I think that gives us such good information far and beyond what our protocols should be for training. It tells us, is there inflammation? Is there blood flow issues? Is there behavior that's subclinical epileptiform, like not seizure, but troublesome stuff? It'll show us what meds might be a good or a poor fit in certain situations. So all those things are important. It also gives you a baseline for as you age or your kid grows, especially if they play an impact sport. You want this baseline for your child. And you want someone who's done the work, right? They are, if not board certified, they're mentored by someone who is, and they really know what they're doing. There's a board, and I'm hoping maybe you can link these in show notes, but iqcb.org is the EEG board, and they have a directory on their website. So you can enter your zip code or your state and county and find who's near you. And it's all over the world. And then for neurofeedback, there are ways to do it at home. It's the right fit. So the EEG is what chooses that. If your kid is going to fight you every step of the way, you may want to think about having it done in an office with the practitioner. If your kid's compliant or are driven and they really want it, there are systems that you can get into that would have oversight by a professional so they can teach you how to use it. They're not all like 1987 Windows programs, but I do say frequently, these programs are not made by Microsoft. So there is some troubleshooting skill.
They're made by psychology researchers and not Apple with a user interface that is very easy to use.
Yeah, it's true. It's getting better, though. There's a lot of advancement. There really is. The amplifiers are better. The equipment is better. Some of the equipment can be a huge investment. There are amplifiers out there you can get a hold of for $30,000. You don't need to do that. There are a lot of places that will do packages. Some will do remote overview, like a Zoom, while you're training to help you. Some do just check-ins here and there. I can look at some of the systems we have for home. I can look online and see exactly how long you trained. How was the signal? Did you meet your goals? Is it time to change your protocols? I can access all of that on the platform on my dashboard. So they can't say, well, I did train. I'm like, not so much. Or, you've been doing great. So there are ways to do it from home. And for some, especially if you have a big athlete that's really dedicated and practicing a lot, we all know what that kind of dedication and time commitment is. Some of them are even online school while they do all this stuff, that these kind of systems could work great, once they just learn how to set it up and how to troubleshoot. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So the first step is find someone who can do an EEG local to you. And you are licensed in at least 2 states, right?
Yes, Illinois, I'm outside of Chicago in Lombard, and Colorado right outside of Denver in Lakewood. Yeah. Right. So we have both of those. But there's good people. Yeah, all over.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is someone send me a message and raise your hand who lives in Illinois who wants to go meet Lisa and do the thing and work through your mental block and tell me how it went, because I'm just so hopeful that this is, something that's going to be really helpful for especially a lot of athletes who are just highly sensitive. So you're smart, sensitive. They're just in their head and they think and think and think and think. And I always wished I was a little dumber when I was a kid because I thought I might be braver. But I don't think that's really actually required.
That doesn't how it works necessarily. But even, I think of you had a show a couple weeks ago about coming back after injury and that gymnast story with college at Utah and all that. And I kept thinking, man, I wish we had her number then, right? Just coming back from injury can be a block for sure. It's athletes too. And even if it's not a head injury, like it was her knee, but
yeah. But you mentioned the concussion. And I mean, the fastest way to a mental block is landing on your head and neck in something, even if it's not, necessarily going to reach concussive state. When athletes, overpower their tumbling and end up landing kind of on their head and neck, the brain goes, nope, we're not doing that anymore. And it really like shuts everything down. So it's this balance where the fear actually becomes more dangerous because it's going to make you bail out versus if you can have the calm focus to be able to execute properly.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's the consumer grade neurofeedback products that are coming on the market. So I'd love to know your perspective on, like the situation where it is someone who's clinically trained, who is, able to help with clinical levels of anxiety, depression, ADHD, versus kind of these like brain optimizing headbands that we're seeing out there. Because, I'd love to know your opinion on how those.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of those now, right? Like biohacking type devices. And so some are headbands, even bigger than a headband where there's actually sensors in several places. I would just say you get what you pay for. There are probably solid consumer-based products that even practitioners are using because they're solid and they're less money and, but they're not a hospital grade amplifier, so you have to take that with what you get. There are some devices out there I would caution against if they don't explain how it works and what it does. There are some companies that we call it a black box where they won't give you any of their proprietary information. Well, you should be cautious with that sort of thing, right? So this is your brain. And although side effects and ab reactions are very rare in good hands, you can have trouble. And so if you are using something that no one will explain to you, that's a red flag. But there are simple things. I'll say this. So HRV, heart rate variability, is biofeedback. And neurofeedback falls under a giant biofeedback umbrella, also called EEG biofeedback, biofeedback for the brain. But biofeedback is anything where you learn to train what is normally an automatic process in your body. So it could be temperature training helps for migraine people, sweat, your skin response helps with anxiety and autonomic response, like fight or flight stuff. But heart rate variability is the ability for your heart to be agile in its electrical sense between beats. And there are great heart rate variability apps. There's one called HRV Plus, I think, or Heart Rate Variability Plus. And you can get like a forever subscription. I think it was $10 or something. But it's really good. And it's a breathing exercise that scores you. You put your fingers on the little camera on your phone, right? Like the little camera takes your pulse. And you follow this prompt on the screen and it scores your heart rate variability. The higher, the better, the more flexibility then your heart has. So those trainings can really bring anxiety down. And that's something simple you can do at home. So that's a cool thing, right? And though you're not going to hurt yourself with that. You're just not. You get bored maybe first. But those are cool to do. And there's other tapping or meditation type stuff out there that's great tools. Once you know how to use those, you could use that skill forever. So, yeah. I mean, those are different. They're not like brainwave based, but they're still strong tools.
Well, and I think anytime you increase awareness of what's happening in your body, it gives you a little bit more control, or at least perceived control of, I feel my adrenaline rising, I have tools I can use to manage it. Even just having that, you have to have the feedback in order to get into flow. In order to find your peak performance state, you have to know, oh, my heart rate is rising, or, whew, I'm feeling adrenaline. So I think anytime you can increase awareness, it's the foundation of feeling like you're more in control of your body and what it's able to do.
Glad you brought that up about adrenaline, because there is one piece that's important if you work with athletes in neurofeedback, is that anxiety is also a drive of sorts, right? So there are some brainwaves on a kiddo that's into scouting or camping that might be causing them trouble, but someone who's, gunning for the Olympics or is, trying to make that high school team on a state championship school, that drive is something that's good for them. So we have to be careful not to dull that while still allowing the brain to be on during while they're competing. Yeah. Performance. Yeah. So there's a balance there, right? You don't want to just calm everything.
Yeah, I can share my experience with that. So I'm just a naturally anxious human, which is why I work with naturally anxious humans so well, because, and why I breed naturally anxious humans. So when I started doing neurofeedback, she kind of turned me way down to the point where I was speaking slower. I was moving slower. I was losing my words a little bit, which isn't something I've ever struggled with. And it actually felt fantastic to, for once in my life, kind of live like a normal speed. But I lost a little bit of my sharpness and lose it for a moment and then come back. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm calm. I'm not snapping at anybody, but this also isn't ideal for performance. And so we went up, and that's where it all kind of integrated. And then, we may even go up again. It's sort of like my brain's on this little bit of a journey of going from chaotic plate spinning to super chilled out to, okay, now I can clean my house and now I can keep a schedule. And then also it's well, okay, let's add it to the frontal lobes. And then we get to sort of move to a different place of optimization, which I just think is so cool.
And that's a good practitioner. She's listening to you. She's taking your feedback and adjusting, right? So that's good. That's good stuff. And I think even though you felt that slow-mo, sloth mode, in a way, now you have a feeling that you will remember if anything happened, or you get into your elder years and you start to notice, wait a minute, this is what that felt like back in the day. And then you know what to do.
Yeah, turn me up a notch, Doc. Yeah. And then also at the same time, we've gone too high and I was ragey. I was impatient. I was more anxious. I was extremely efficient with my computer work. So I was like, okay, I can be really good with a computer, but not with humans at this setting. So, and then we found the Goldilocks basically. So it really is fascinating how, and even with my kids, it's sort of they're thriving here and, oh, now that's feeling too low or now it's feeling too high. So and I don't obviously thank goodness, I don't have to be the one to decide. I go to my professional who's then guiding through all the and we're doing reports and it's not guesswork, which is great. It's based on the data, this is what we do next. So I'm a huge fan. So I'm hopeful that some of you out there, I know some of us are we already have graduate degrees in Googling mental blocks. So now they're going to go get one in neurofeedback and start learning for that mom who's about to hit Google, if you could give them kind of a little bit of advice.
Yeah, the main thing is it's great to have a baseline for your child. If they are, let's say, 5th grade to 8th grade, it would be good to have one in those years. If they are playing a high impact sport in high school, I would say you might want one every year to compare. And you would need to go get the same type of one each year, or they're not apples to apples. But even for us parents who are doing this runaround with the kids, get one, right? So before you get into your aging years that what your baseline is. But the main thing is you want to feel comfortable with the practitioner. You want to feel like they're explaining to you and answering your questions, going at a pace. It is a process. This is not I'm going to try it 6 times and quit. It takes time, but for the results to last, you want to give it that time. So that's that. And I'm happy to answer questions for folks. mindbodyneuro.com is my website, and that gets you to either location. And, if you mention, I heard about you on the podcast, I'm happy to do a 10% off the assessment. It's just good stuff. And most of the time you're going to be in good shape. You're not going to cause trouble.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, our worst side effects were I got a little snappy at my kids, and then I lost a few words here and there. So, fairly low impact and easy to then use as guidance. So, okay. Well, Lisa Kramer, I'm so grateful for this time letting me pick your brain and nerd out on this very cool.
Yeah, no worries.
Technology.
It's fun. Yeah.
So mindbodyneuro.com is your website. Reach out with questions for Lisa. If you are the gymnast in Chicago who's experiencing a mental block and you want to be I'm going to say guinea pig, but it's like, obviously this is very well tested. So it's not like we're trying anything fresh.
Yeah, reach out.
But I really want like the first testimonial of, this really does like allow the mental training to set in an efficient way. So if that's you, reach out. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Best of luck to you and in your expanding business. And thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no worries. Take care.